Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is October 23rd, in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. Folks, I've finally been trolled on YouTube. And we talked about this last week. I was watching some of these very anti-freedom feminists out there on YouTube. I was trying to figure out what they're talking about with their modern feminism, or what they call second and third wave, mostly third wave feminism, because people define those terms differently, and I'd rather go with the people that actually have proven what they said is right over the ones who just want you to take their word for what's right. And there's a first wave feminism, which happened over 100 years ago. There's a second wave feminism, as some of them describe it, back in the 50s and 60s, wanting, and the thing is, let me back up a second. Rights are asexual. They're neither male nor female. Freedom of speech doesn't matter what sex you are, male or female. You got a right to speak. But they wanted their opportunities to be equal in work, in rights, and all these other things. I understand that, and I agree with that. But then you come up into the modern day third wave feminism, and they want to stand the whole society on its head because of suppositions. So I was listening to this video, and as I have habit to do, if I want to comment, as I'm going through the video, I'll make comments on points that are made in the video. And some folks didn't understand that. They said, well, if you're going to comment in the video, wait till it's done and just make one big comment. And I said, I don't comment that way. As I hear points come up, I'll make a comment about that point in the video. And someone accused me of spamming. I'm like, how can I be spamming if I'm actually commenting on what's being said in the video? Just the way I choose to comment is what you have a disagreement with. And just because you call it spamming doesn't necessarily mean it's spamming. And it's not. And then I was accused of coming over here and I was just a right-wing troller. I was a white male patriarch, because they go see my picture and everything on my Facebook and Twitter. And I don't hide the fact that I'm white. But they started up with all these accusations and then started saying I was trolling. Well, trolling is actually going to leave, in my opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth, is leaving a bunch of comments on a site that are ancillary at best, that have very little to do with the content. And basically, it was the show on about freedom and liberty and what they actually were. And this feminist, which again, and you can do what you want to on the internet. I do not hide on the internet. And that doesn't make me any better than anybody else there. I'm one of those people that I'm straight up and straight, I'm a straight shooter, as it were. And I'm not going to hide who I am on the internet and be able to go around and putting smackdowns on folks and people not knowing who I am. And this happens a lot, especially with these very anti-freedom movements out there. They don't want you to know who they are. And so they hide behind these monikers. Antifa hides behind, masks and hoodies, so you can't recognize them. And just the hiding and hiding and hiding. And they can hide all they want, but they're still found out in the end, is all I'm concerned about. But anyway, this feminist left about 12 messages on that particular video. And like I said, they had very little to do with what I was talking about in the video, but she just, basically what she was doing, she wanted to give me a taste of my own medicine, as it were. That how dare I come in and comment and leave so many comments on her website. But my comments were in answering to points that she put out in an interview on the video. So again, it's kind of funny how anti-freedom folks view things and how freedom folks view the same thing totally opposite. I was watching an interview of Milo Yiannopoulos. I guess he's on some type of book tour, I guess, promoting his latest book. And he was on Aussie television. I was watching this video clip of it. And this feminist kept talking about, well, what you're doing is hate speech. What you're doing is hateful. And I was screaming to the TV, hate is a very subjective term. You know, if you take it as hate, that's on you. If it was not intended to be, and most of the time, I'm not saying Milo Yiannopoulos does not tweak noses. We all do it from time to time. But the problem is, if and it is, hate is very subjective, especially when you talk about hate speech is very subjective, because just like the old saying, one man's candy is another man's poison, one man's junk is one man's treasure. It's all how you look at it. Now, I'm convinced that the folks in the anti-freedom side of things are very hostile to freedom. So they'll say anything they can to put a negative light on anything that they disagree with, especially when it comes to speech. Now, today, I titled the show, When Freedom Isn't Allowed. Last week, we ended up talking about on the show, and again, I want to thank Professor F.H. Buckley from George Mason Law School for coming on and interviewing with me on Friday. We had a very good interview, although I was having issues with Skype. And a real quick note here, it wasn't me, it was Skype, because I went through and I did some other testing, and no matter if I was using my laptop or any other computer up here with nothing else running, I was still getting voice quality issues with Skype. It was ridiculous. So I shot off a message to them. Hopefully they get back to me today and I'll find out a little bit about what's going on there. So I had a real good interview with that, but then I finished up the show talking about these college campuses, talking about how these college campuses are just killing us on free speech. And freedom isn't allowed. When freedom isn't allowed is when people shut down your right to say what you want to say, no matter how wrong other people think it is. And this, I have a real quick video. I think, do I have a video? No, I don't have a video of it. And, oh, that's right, because of the swear words, I'm not going to put it up. I'm still doing some research on how to blank out, when I do a video, how to blank out those. So I'm still working on that. I guess I could go in and open up in my editor and just remove the words and just put a beep in there. I guess that's probably how they do it. So I thought maybe there might be an easier way, but with my luck, there isn't. But anyway, I can't show you the videos, but there's out in Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz, California, there was a conservative Republicans group that was meeting in the basement of a library, out of sight from everybody. The student activists got word of it, and they pretty much stormed that room and demanded that this stop because of and it's arbitrary. Everything they're talking about is arbitrary. You know, that they're Nazis, they're fascists, this is hate speech. It's dangerous to the people around here to listen to this. All those are subjective, arbitrary terms. And again, I want to explain this real quick here, and I do mean to use this term. These child adults who have no experience in life whatsoever think that they have the right. They think that they have the right to come in and shut down somebody else's speech because they don't agree with it, because it hurts their little feelings. And the problem is, this is the biggest problem, folks. When you shut down other people's freedoms, when you don't allow their freedoms to be exercised, and if that goes too far, guess who's the next ones that are going to get their freedoms not allowed, that aren't going to be allowed to exercise their freedoms? You're right if you guess these student activists or these folks in the anti-freedom side of things that look at everything and describe them in very subjective terms. It's crazy, folks. It's crazy what's going on out there. And these, I said, these conservative Republicans that were meeting, they left. Now, I'm told, I was doing some research here, that this head agitator and a couple other students, because the police got involved in it, they were the ones that arrested. because they were the ones causing the trouble. They were the ones raising their voices, and they're the ones that got arrested. Now, not that I wish anybody ever gets hurt, but it would deserve these student activists right if they had felony charges filed against them and were found guilty of these felony charges. They don't realize how wrecking that is to their future. Especially, now, I can't say that 100% because I forget about President Obama's, the Weather Underground group, Bill Ayers, and those guys were definitely domestic terrorists, and yet they went on to be professors and stuff. So, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I tell you what, it doesn't look good on your job application, especially if you're getting a job that you need a criminal background check to be done in. It does not look good that you have a felony conviction on your record. And honestly, I think this is what has to happen. I believe when you violently shut down somebody else's freedom of speech, not that it's a hate crime, because you can't quantify what's in somebody's mind at the time that they did something, even if they were saying something, because again, hate is a very subjective, even the idea of hate is very subjective. Okay, should be a felony offense. Maybe it would stop some of these brats out there, these child adults, from doing it. Probably not, but it might keep some of the more reasonable ones, as it were, from doing things stupidly and wrong. So it amazes me how many Americans are allowing other Americans' freedoms to be disallowed. I was told, and I asked for clarification. I don't know if they're going to give it. There was a couple other comments left on this video that I was critiquing and saying that I should be deplatformed everywhere. Oh, that's the answer. You don't agree with what I'm saying. You don't agree with what I'm doing. So let's just take away his platform, my ability to practice freedom of speech. Let's just take that away from me because you don't agree with what I'm saying. Because even though what I'm saying, I don't say it in a hateful manner, and I never mean it to be hate. I mean it to be thought-provoking, and literally, like this gentleman in that video I shared last Friday, the gentleman there, one of the professors at Brown University, if someone has angst against what I'm saying, they can take me to the intellectual woodshed if they want to, if they dare to, but to deplatform me, or to deplatform anybody because you don't want to hear that speech. And again, there are, in some of them videos I shared Friday, there are arbitrary judgments being made. Because what you think is racist may not be. And the problem is, the folks on the anti-left never feel the need to have to qualify their statements. If they say, well, that's racist speech, they never qualify that. In their mind, their judgment is final, that's racist and it cannot be debated. Their judgment is final that Donald Trump is a racist because racists supported him. Donald Trump didn't go out looking for that support, just like Ronald Reagan did not go out looking for the gay community support in the form of the log cabin Republicans. And that is not what guilt by association means. Guilt by association is what Dr. Christy Winters does when she supports other third-wave feminists and their intersectionality or their intersectional feminism. And yet, that's not, I was told by some of her followers, that's not guilt by association. What are you talking about? That is the exact definition of what guilt by association is. I may not be a part of, and I'm not, and not that I would never be, but I used to be, I think for a couple of years, a member of the NRA. But I let that lapse because of money issues and stuff like that. And just because I was in the past, now people guilt by association again. Now, I support the NRA. I support anybody that wants to join the NRA. Intellectually, I support that. Okay. Am I guilty because of their actions? No, but if I support them, and I don't think this is guilt or innocence things. If I support the NRA, if I come out and say I support the NRA, then I tacitly support their actions, and therefore I am guilty by association. Okay? That is guilt by association because I initiated the association. I'm the one that stepped forward. Now, the NRA can advertise me all they want and try to get me to come over, but it's fine. The final decision's up to me. Now, once I take that step, yes, I am guilty by association. I associated myself freely and willingly with the NRA. But it doesn't work the other way around. If I do something wrong, because the NRA doesn't tacitly support me, as far as, not tacitly, they don't come out and say, look, I support everything that Dan Clements does. It's not how they work. And if I do something bad, nasty, and against the law, they can distance themselves from me, and that's okay. Because again, they're not guilty by my association with them. I chose to be with them. They didn't choose to be with me. You see what I'm saying? Now, some people might say that's splitting hairs, but I don't look at it that way. And I don't see it that way. But the anti-freedom folks out there want to do that. There was this guy, I don't know if we'll get to it, on MSNBC. He called the GOP the Republi-Klan party. The Republiu-Klan party, okay? And talk about rewriting history. And again, he's going back on this white supremacy thing, that these white supremacists support Donald Trump, therefore Donald Trump's a white supremacist. Well, there's a lot of LGBT people that supported Donald Trump too. Does that make him gay or trans or lesbian or anything like that? Again, they're very selective and they cherry pick what they want to accuse people of. So again, it's very disturbing to me how these people think that they're being intellectually honest when they come out and do this guilt by association, or, because they think that they're in the right and they pronounce something to be something. It's, it's almost like the old Ten Commandments movie with Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner as Pharaoh. So let it be written, so let it be done. That's the attitude. We say it, it's so. Without any debate. Without any basic debate saying, wait a minute, we need to discuss this, whether what they're saying is actually racist or not. That's what it should be. It should rise up to an intellectual level where we're able to have civil public discourse. And I imagine the conservative Republicans on campus are more than happy to sit down with these folks and have a frank, open discussion about if what they're doing is racist or what they're saying is racist or not. But that'll never happen with this attitude and this atmosphere that's happening today on college campuses, because they just will not allow freedom to be practiced. They are literally stomping on fellow citizens' freedoms to put forth their ideology, which cannot be supported. Again, I'm probably not going to get to it again today, but I got into a discussion with indivisible guide groups over the weekend about taxation. Again, they're bringing out these felonious, just false articles, just fake news articles about the Donald Trump's tax plan. That's only the corporations are going to get the money, and they're just going to pay it out in these golden parachutes. And the reason why they believe this is because guys like Robert B. Reich, former labor secretary, who is not an economist, came out and told them that's what it was. And when you read through some of the comments, it's almost like they just lifted his words out of his blogs or out of his videos and used them. And I asked this one person that was really dogmatic about it. I said, "Oh, so if you're only making $50,000 a year, and under President Trump's tax plan, if you're married, let's say just you and your husband, no kids, if you're married and you and your husband, let's say, make $50,000, $60,000 a year together, the first $26,000 of your 24 to 26, somewhere in there, let's put it at 24 just to be fair. Your first $24,000 you make is non-taxed. You're telling me that's not putting money back in your pocket just from the tax break alone? Plus you'd be in a lower tax bracket to begin with? That's not putting money back in your pocket? Crickets. Not a word was said in response to that. And I even repeated it a couple of times. I said, come on, folks, let's be intellectually honest here. Nothing. They wouldn't say, they just kept hammering at that corporate idea. They kept hammering at this the old, this came up during Ronald Reagan's time in office, folks. The voodoo economics of Reaganomics. There wasn't nothing voodoo about it, and history is on the side of the tax cuts. There's actual raw numbers out there that's searchable, knowable, understandable that go against everything the Indivisible Guide says about taxes. Again, they won't allow Americans to practice their freedoms. Freedom's not allowed in their minds. Because these tax cuts, they're not being paid for. And that's about the stupidest thing in the world. They're not being paid for. Well, I'll tell you how we can pay for some of them tax cuts. Well, we cut the budget. Oh, we can't cut the budget. Well, let's cut the military. I'm not against that. I think we need to go through the military and cut the fat out. There's a lot of fat that can probably be cut out of there. No doubt in my mind. But if we're going to cut the military, which is a constitutional department, why don't we look into welfare? Why don't we look into these other unconstitutional bureaucracies that take billions upon billions of dollars out of taxpayers' dollars that are not constitutional? Why don't we go that route? Again, when I bring up the Constitution with this, they're either totally silent or they bring up the erroneous argument about the general welfare when we talk about welfare. And when I point them back to what the Founding Fathers thought of general welfare, again, I get crickets. I get no response. I get no response from these folks. And that's telling in and of itself. But my point in saying all this, when freedom isn't allowed, a lot of things happen in our lives that actually curtail our freedoms. Like with these college students that want to discuss these topics. Oh, we got to shut them down. It's not that they're only shutting down their freedom of speech. They're shutting down their freedom to know. To actually find out if what they're doing is wrong. Instead of just somebody arbitrarily standing up there as judge, jury, and executioner saying, we can't talk about these things. Well, I'm sorry. If you pronounce that we can't talk about these things, I think these are the very things we need to be talking about. And if that still makes you mad, tough. Life's tough, son. Get over it. You know, life's not easy for anybody out here. Even the supposed privileged folks. It's not easy. They have their own struggles that you don't have and I don't have, and sometimes I'm glad I don't have them. But when you arbitrarily come in and shut down freedom of speech, you're not allowing somebody to exercise their freedoms. And one of the freedoms is the right to know. You know, and what I'm saying is that, am I wrong in that? Is there something wrong with me thinking this way? And sit down and have a civil public discourse. You know, let the ideas get out there and air themselves out in the marketplace of ideas. And only through the discussion will we actually know. It was only through the discussion between Dave and Al that I actually found out the truth about the Bible. I was going along with an erroneous idea about what the Bible said and how I was supposed to follow God and what I was supposed to do. And it was only through this civil public discourse that we had with each other that I come to find out the truth. I did not call down a crusade on their heads saying, you infidels, we're going how dare you blaspheme the Catholic Church and I'm coming at you. I didn't say that. I wanted to know if what they had to say had any merit to it. That's all I'm saying. We have to allow freedom. We have to allow people to practice freedom. And when freedom isn't allowed, that diminishes everybody. That diminishes everybody, folks. All right. Today's show is being brought to you by Sears Part Direct. Now, if you're the handyman of the house, I don't care which gender you are, handyman, handywoman, handy person of the house, doesn't matter to me. If you're the one that fixes things around the house and you need parts, but you don't have time to go out to get them or track them down or make phone calls during the week, I got the perfect solution for you. Go over to danclemenshow.com and click on the Sears Parts Direct widget. It'll take you over to their site, and they have parts over there for lawn equipment, outdoor power equipment, and appliances, and some other things over there that you can buy to repair your stuff. And that's the way if you go over there early in the week, you might have the stuff by the weekend, to work on that honey-do list or that my to-do list to get that whittled down. And if you go over to danclementshow.com right now and you click on the widget, you'll get 10% off your parts orders if you put in the offer code that's there on the widget. Okay. If you notice, sometimes my voice may be coming in and out. I've been messing around with my compressor on my mixer, and I'm going to continue to do that, not so much during the show, but I'm going to try to get this thing set right because it said it might help me on my Skype, just as a note for those folks out there that might be having the same issues I am with their Skype. All right, today's daily Bible reading comes from the Epistle of James, chapter 1, verses 5 through 10. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who will give to all liberally without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like the wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field, he will pass away. And we were talking in Bible study on Sunday about how men sometimes get their just rewards because they're looking for praise from men. And that's their actual reward that they're getting, no matter what, if it's prayer or giving, anything like that. So we were talking about that. I had a good Bible study on Sunday morning this week. Today's quote mail comes from Charles H. Spurgeon. Nobody ever outgrows Scripture. The book widens and deepens with our years. And boy, ain't that the truth. The more I think I know, the more I know that the more truths I actually find out that I didn't know before when it comes to the Bible. Grand book there. Today's short Bible lesson, and let me just, is from Kevin Cowley over at gewatkins.net, and it's a sermon on perseverance. And it's amazing to me how sometimes we don't want to persevere, but we always have to never give up. We always have to persevere. We absolutely do. Folks, I'm going to start this video again about our universities killing free speech. And I just want to go through about the first half of this video, and then we'll come back into the show.
Can I just make a suggestion? Can we just have a conversation?
No. The problem that they're having is heterosexual white males have always dominated the space. And so one in which heterosexual...
Then I would not.
Well, homosexual, it don't matter. White males are at the top of the hierarchy. It don't matter.
This is Brown University, the elite Ivy League college famed for its radical student activism and wide-open curriculum that, yes, does technically allow you to major in drum circle studies. It's also my beloved alma mater. I entered Brown about a decade and a half ago, perfectly embodying that charming paradox common to newly minted adults. I'd never known less about the world, and yet somehow also never had more confidence in my opinions about it. The endless campus debates burned away a lot of the stupid stuck to my brain. But now that vital campus dialogue is being snuffed out, Brown has been overrun by this nasty, censoring species of student activism that's overtaking college campuses across the country.
You need to get out!
Back in the fall of 2013, former New York City Police Chief Ray Kelly was invited to give a lecture about his controversial stop and frisk policies. Protesters picketed outside, filled the lecture hall, and then they did this.
Thank you,
Asking tough questions is not enough!
They shouted down administrators.
It has to be a basic principle of this university that we allow for free speech. We're asking you to allow.
They shouted down students.
your inability to listen is why my voice.
Racism is not for debate.
And then they got their way.
We're going to ask that everyone please leave the auditorium.
They didn't respond to our demand to cancel the lecture, so we canceled it for them.
This is not the Brown that I know. This is students weaponizing victimhood to stifle debate, and things have gotten steadily worse since then. So I went back to campus to find out why.
University ought first and foremost be a place in which reason determines outcomes, not the ability to throw tantrums or fits. The people who perpetrated this act of tyranny are remembered in heroic terms at this university and held up as an example of student activism as a positive thing. That's an error. It's a profound error.
We all collectively, need to just own. Sometimes things don't go the way we plan. And certainly in the wake of that, there was a lot of learning that happened.
I got called a white supremacist when I tried to go inside.
Brown administrators did even worse than capitulate a year later. The writer Wendy McElroy was invited to be on the con side in a debate about whether America has a rape culture. Student critics framed McElroy's opinions as a kind of mind violence. They set up one of those infamous safe spaces running videos of puppies to protect themselves from her really hurtful beliefs.
The political majority on this campus believe that speech that disagrees with the conclusions of the left is in and of itself an act of violence. It becomes, in this moral calculus, as warped as it may seem to outsiders, rational to shut down something like the Ray Kelly lecture.
University President Christina Paxton preemptively denounced McElroy in a school-wide email and set up a competing lecture.
There has been a lot of pain, and we wanted to create the kind of respectful, thoughtful climate that invites those conversations without harming individuals.
Whatever thin caricature student critics had constructed of McElroy was promptly shattered by the actual content of her speech.
When I was 16, I was raped, and brutally so. I had a hemorrhage in my right eye that left me blind. I know the pain and the importance of violence against women because I see half of the world because of it. North America is not a rape culture, and it is an insult to women who live in one that women here, with so much freedom and so much opportunity, are trying to share the same status with them.
Shortly thereafter, in a closed-door faculty meeting, a small group of professors introduced a resolution that simply reaffirmed a section in Brown's own founding charter on the value of the free exchange of ideas. That resolution did not pass. Leading the charge against it, a star professor named Tricia Rose, who said that even considering the resolution again would extend the pain.
It's not an argument. It's a move of power, not a move of reason.
The main thing they want is a conformity. Just fall into line. Where some things cannot be said, some ideas cannot be spoken.
Here's an illuminating nugget about Tricia Rose. She has a lecture in which she literally has students pledge their loyalty to her politics.
I am not personally responsible for racism. Or in fact, any other vast form of structural oppression. Even though I very likely benefit personally from some aspect of them.
Many students in last year's freshman class received an orientation pamphlet that denounced data and statistics as structures of oppression and mapped the unsafe spaces on campus. Among them, this historic lecture hall, because its portraits of white former university presidents constitute microaggressions. And guess who the administration picked to give the opening convocation address?
I'm not sure I went to the equivalent of this when I was a first year at Yale, but it's different there.
Professor Rose showed them that a string of fashionable jargon is indeed an acceptable substitute for an argument.
We have used in the post-civil rights era the ideology of the illusion of colorblindness as the rhetorical vehicle for the maintenance and development of a system like the prison industrial complex.
Now, the excesses of Brown's activists obscure some legitimate grievances. Most importantly, of course there's such a thing as privilege. I'm its distilled essence. I'm the product of a plush Los Angeles private school. I've never suffered racist slights. I didn't have to take on a single cent in student loans. The Ivy League was originally built by and for people like me. And activists are right to demand that it evolve to better accommodate students that don't share my advantages. Last fall, Brown unveiled a multi-million-dollar plan that, in part, did just that. And here's how student activists thanked them. They stormed the president's office and shouted down the provost.
Can I just make a suggestion? I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. I just want to. Can we just have a conversation?
No. The problem that they're having is heterosexual white males have always dominated the space, and so one in which heterosexual. And I wouldn't count. Well, homosexual, it don't matter. White males are at the top of the hierarchy. It don't matter.
This is not a grand battle against institutionalized injustice. This is an addiction to indignation.
We also had obligations like being in class, but we can't focus on those things. We have to focus on staying alive.
That same semester, Brown's student newspaper published a pair of columns which essentially argued that European colonialism generated some economic benefits for Native Americans. These columns made easy tinder for another explosion of student outrage.
We beg this university to hold the BDH accountable.
We should not have to be in pain for you to do something.
The paper's editors buckled, retracting one of the columns and denouncing both as racist.
Essentially is a climate of censorship. What you say has to conform to our sort of worldview, and if it doesn't, then you're a racist.
All right, folks, that's sort of the point I wanted to get to in that video where they're talking about, that one person on the microphone. They said, what about our pain? Honestly, that again is a very subjective thing. They're not old. Honestly, I don't think they're old enough to have gone through. I'm not saying every one of them, but the vast majority of these college students have not gone through the oppression they claim that they're going through, or that society is fostering upon them. A lot of the oppression they get is self-imposed. I might get in trouble for saying that, but that's exactly what's happening here. It's self-imposed oppression. Now, let me go over to this article here. This is from the Campus Reform. Students storm library, shut down college, Republican meeting. And they go through, they have a video on that page. You can go in there. I thought it was really good in this one, there's a tweet there. As a Democrat, I'm embarrassed that some people on the left act this way. They give us a terrible name. And that's right. And it's not, again, I can't go to this left-right paradigm anymore because later on the week I'm going to be talking about the collectivism on the right by Jeffrey Tucker over at fee.org. He wrote a book about this. And I was reading the article, and the left-right paradigm just falls down on a lot of this stuff because, yes, are there collectivists over on the right? Yes. Or Republican? Yes. But that doesn't make oppression a right or a left-wing ideology, folks. That's where the whole argument breaks down. It's either freedom or anti-freedom. That's a better description for that. Now, there's another one here from Reason.com, which actually, in Reason.com, they actually name some names, which I think is good. We need to name some of these students, and not that we give out their home addresses or anything like that, but if they're going to be public like this, and they're adults, not children anymore. Of course, they act like children, like little 2-year-old brats, and even that's disparaging the 2-year-olds out there, folks. So students crashed college Republicans meeting at UC Santa Cruz to demand a shutdown to this. The students crashed a CR meeting in the basement of a campus library earlier this week. The CRs attempted to have a dialogue with the protesters, but the protesters maintained that dialogue is violence. Civil public discourse, airing out your ideas in the marketplace of ideas, is now considered violence because they choose to deem what you say as hateful and violent. Oh my goodness. These child adults here, they're on these college campuses, do not know what real violence is. For the most part, I'm not saying some of them didn't grow up in tough neighborhoods and experience violence. I'm not saying it at all. But these ones, the folks here, I do not believe just because of what they're saying and how they're saying it, that dialogue is violence. They do not know what true violence is. They do not know what it means when you get into a fight and you don't know if the other guy's trying to kill you or not. Even in a fisticuff. You don't know what the other guy's intentions are. You don't know true violence. And dialogue is never, ever violence. If you give the words the power to harm you, mentally, whatever, intellectually, whatever, that's on you. That is on you. You do not have a right, because you think that dialogue is violence, to suppress my freedoms. It doesn't work that way. And I'm telling you right now, not that I'm going to be the one doing it, but you go around and you suppress enough people's freedoms, I don't care what they are, eventually they're going to fight back. Right now you're poking the stick on a sleeping giant here in America. But eventually it's going to come to a boiling point, and people are going to start fighting back. And I'm not saying they're going to start fighting back physically. I think they're going to come out of the woodwork, and they're going to show these child adults what intellectual intimidation really is. And it's going to be truthful intimidation, how they're going to lay bare their ideology as a false dichotomy. It's a false narrative. And it amazes me that not more adults have spoken out on this. But there's going to come a point. There's always a tipping point in all these struggles where enough Americans are going to get sick of seeing other Americans' freedoms not being allowed to be practiced. And Katie barred the door. These child adults are going to be taken to the intellectual woodshed, as that professor said. That's exactly what's going to happen. He goes on to say, after it says dialogue is violence, and that the CR's mere presence in the library was an explicit threat against marginalized students and an act of violence. The protesters even asked library staff to evict the CRs from the building, according to Campus Reform. After 2 hours, the police involved themselves, and 3 of the protesters were arrested. The CRs have also asked UC Santa Cruz student government to sanction the protesters, since 2 of them were in fact members of the student government. Campus Reform obtained some video footage of the incident in the clip below. CRs and protesters are heatedly arguing with one another. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. They appear to be having the exact kind of dialogue the CRs claimed they wanted, and the protesters' claim was violence. But my favorite part of the exchange happens towards the end, when one of the students, presumably a CR, accuses the protesters of selection bias. And folks, that CR student is right to do so, because these guys were down in a basement, in the library, in a room with doors, and they had to be sought out by these student activists. That is the violence. The violence is being perpetrated by these student activists that are going and seeking these folks out, claiming an imperial judgment upon what they are doing, saying it is violence. And, it comes down to the old saying, my dad, you know, and most of the discipline I got, if not all of it, but not quite all of it, because I did take some discipline from my brothers. Most of the discipline I got from my dad was deserved. And not that he ever did this, but if I ever got whiny, and I did every now and then, and started crying and complaining about something, the phrase that would come out of my dad's mouth, and I think most boys in America have heard this, at least guys that are my age, that if you don't stop crying and whining, I'm going to give you something to cry and whine about. And you pretty quickly shut your pie hole and thought about what you were doing. Because if Dad had to say that, what you were doing was stupid. You were being dumb and stupid. And so you see what I'm saying, folks? These students literally had to seek out these conservative Republicans. They weren't out in the public square. They weren't out on the lawn discussing this wherever we could see it. They were, and I'm not saying they were hiding, this was an empty space. They went into it. They thought they were okay in there. And lo and behold, you have these child adults coming down there and putting their pronouncements, imperial pronouncements, folks, that what you're saying is violence, which it wasn't. What they were doing was actually the violent part of it, because they actually came in trying to stop somebody from practicing their freedoms, disallowing their freedoms. The article goes on to say, if this was any other group, if this was a communist group or socialist group, if this was a democratic group, if this was a centrist group, nobody would be here saying anything, said the student. But because the title says Republicans, and because that's connected to Trump, because communists aren't racist, a protester injected. I can't read the word there for you. Communists have killed and imprisoned or impoverished millions, but it's arguably true that communists committed these murders irrespective of the race and ethnic origins of their victims. That's what really matters, it seems. And that's exactly right. Socialism and communism and fascism doesn't care about your skin color. It doesn't. All it cares is about power and control. And that's exactly what these student protesters demonstrated, that they're okay with socialism and communism. They're okay with not allowing people to exercise their freedom of assembly and their freedom of speech. They're okay with that. And again, like I said, usually when that happens, the hand that you just bit, the one that's feeding you, will come back and slap the dog snot at you. It's history, folks. It's happened all throughout history. I have this other article that I thought I'd share with you along these same lines from the independent.org blog by Randall Holcomb. You're stupid, so we're going to take away your freedom. Again, when freedom isn't allowed. This was posted back in June 6th of 2016, but I think it directly addresses what's happening today, not only on college campuses, but all over the nation, especially when it comes to freedom of speech. In a country based on the principle of liberty, should we really contemplate depriving people of freedom because they sometimes don't make choices expert thinks are the best for them? And I'm going to stop the reading here. I'm an American. And I think I have the freedom to make the dumbest choices in the world that hurt me and the folks that depend on me. I think I have that freedom. Matter of fact, I think I have that God-given right to do dumb and stupid. But because I have that right to do dumb and stupid, I also have to face the consequences of those dumb and stupid decisions. You see what I'm saying? Nobody has a right, I don't care how elitist or how intelligent you are, you think you are, or how intelligent you think your group is. Nobody has the right to take that freedom of choice away from me. You see what I'm saying? But I read on here. My title really understates the liberty-depriving philosophy of the nanny state. More accurately, it is some people make what we think are bad choices, so we are going to deprive everyone of liberty. I'm thinking about, after reading Harvard professor John Y. Campbell's article in May 2016 issue of American Economic Review titled Restoring Rational Choice, The Challenge of Rational Consumer Regulation. Campbell reviews several bad financial decisions consumers tend to make, such as not refinancing their mortgages when it is financially beneficial to do so, and ultimately concludes The complexity of the 21st century financial arrangements poses a daunting challenge to households managing their financial affairs. So, household financial mistakes create a new rationale for intervention in the economy. People make financial decisions that Professor Campbell think are mistakes, so he wants government to intervene. Now, let me make this point. We converted this loan. We went back and looked at it. It was 2003, late 2003 in the fall. We converted a lease purchase on the house we're living in over to a mortgage, a fixed rate mortgage. We have a 6%. I'm not ashamed to say that. I know fixed rates have come down over the years, but because of other financial things that happened to us over the years, we weren't able to refinance because of our credit scores or whatever. And I thank God that we still at least have a fixed rate and we have a house that we can live in. And isn't that choice, whether I make that choice to refinance or not, isn't that my decision? And just because I don't want to refinance, is that necessarily a mistake? Yes, I could save money. Yeah, I could save. I think if I went down 4%, I could probably save 150 or 200 a month. Probably not even that. I have to go look at the figures again. It's been a while since I did that. But because of some other considerations, I can't refinance. So is it stupid because I can't refinance or refuse to refinance? So government's going to intervene on my behalf? You know, I've been told that I was foolish for taking a fixed rate mortgage. I should have went for one of those subprime mortgages when I bought the loan. Huh. Glad I didn't listen to them folks. I'm really glad I didn't listen to them folks. You don't know what the future is going to hold. You really don't. You don't know if something's going to happen to your family that financially almost bankrupts you, and you know you got to work your behind off to work yourself back up to a reasonable level, and you know your credit score takes a hit. You know, I just thank God I got a roof over my head and clothes on my back, and you know my family's protected, and we got food on the table. Whose business is it that I pay a higher interest rate? You know, to me that's elitism at its best. I go on to read, Professor Campbell has lots of company here. People argue that government should restrict consumers' choices of what drugs to take, both recreation and pharmaceutical, force them to pay for safety equipment on their cars that, as it turns out, can explode and kill them, force them to participate, and we're talking about airbags there, folks, force them to participate in the government retirement program, and even limit their ability to buy sugary carbonated beverages. In all these cases, the argument is that left to their own devices, people make bad choices, so the government should intervene to force them to act more, to use Campbell's term, rationally. Freedom has no meaning if people are only free to make the choices government experts think are rational. And again, rational, that rational choices is a very subjective term. It cannot be quantified. There's no way you can make it into an objective term, because what's rational for somebody may not seem rational to somebody else. Oh, I hate having to explain the difference between subjective and objective, but people, even these elitists, get this stuff confused. Okay, I read on. The arrogance of this view of appropriate role of government is striking. Progressives think from people like Professor Campbell and Michael Bloomberg concludes that they can make better decisions for you than you could make for yourself. Therefore, they will force you to do what they think is best. But ultimately, it won't be Campbell or Bloomberg who will make those decisions for you. It will be a group of politicians who are more looking out for their own political futures than your welfare. Does government really make better choices for people than they can themselves? I would say a resounding no. Campbell's conclusion that household financial mistakes create a new rationale for government intervention in the economy overlooks longstanding government interventions into household financial affairs. And folks, that is where the 2008 housing bubble burst came from, is because the government and regulations and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the regulators on Wall Street not regulating those debt instruments and mortgage debt instruments. It was government oversight. Oh, we know better than you. Yeah, you really did. You almost ruined the world's economy. That's how much better you know than we do. Oh, one only has to look at the Social Security program established because people make the mistake of not saving enough for their retirements. That system continually gives taxpayers a lower rate of return on their payroll taxes than they could if they invest in the stock market. In theory, people make mistakes and practice government intervention into household financial affairs leaves many of them worse off, and that's without noting the projections that the system soon will be broke. The nanny state premise that people should be deprived of their freedoms because they might make bad choices attacks the political philosophy on which this nation was founded. If Campbell wants to spread the word that people are making what he views as financial mistakes, I'm all in favor of that. But it strikes at the idea of the American founders to suggest that people's financial mistakes offer a new rationale for government intervention in the economy. And folks, this can go over into any aspect of what we've been talking about here, with these student activists and stuff. They think they know better than anybody else, so they're going to make their pronouncements without any debate, without trying not to be taken to the intellectual woodshed, which they would if they got into debate with some of these conservative Republicans and some of these folks on the freedom side of things. They would literally be torn to pieces. You know, it wouldn't be a woodshed, it'd be a wood chipper that they'd be getting into, because their ideas do not hold water. They're not backed by logic, fact, common sense, or truth. They are what they want and how they say things ought to be, not how other people want things to be. I don't want to impose, and I get accused of this all the time with my Christianity. I don't want to impose my Christianity on anybody. That's not to say I'm not going to preach the principles and the gospel, the principles of Christianity and the gospel to folks. But you know what? I can't force you to believe, and I can't even force you to listen. All you got to do is say, I don't want to hear it. Okay. You don't want to hear it. That's fine. I'm not going to force you to sit there and listen to it. But neither am I going to pronounce on you that you're a dumb, stupid idiot for not sitting down and listening to me. That's not my place either. I'm allowing you the freedom of making choices whether I think those choices are bad or not. I think someone not listening to the gospel and obeying the gospel is a bad choice, but even God doesn't force people to follow that. You know, God gives people the choice, and he gives people the time to come to acceptance of his. But I get accused all the time of forcing my Christianity on people. And when in fact, the people that say that are the ones that want to force their ideology on everybody else. I want people to be free, like Adam Smith. I want people to exercise their freedoms as long as they're not aggressing against somebody else and bring their own personal industry to the marketplace and expose it to competition. I think that's the best way to live, folks. I really, really do. I see we're coming down in time here, that we are slowly winding down the clock here, trying to get back over to my controls here. We've got just a little over a minute here. I didn't get to the tax things. We'll pick up on this tomorrow. We're going to talk about the tax reform. We're also going to, because I'm still working on it, I'm going over what George Bush said, and there's been a whole brouhaha about what George Bush said and the response the response by Donald Trump. And most of the responses I've been hearing are from the lamestream media. So I don't give them a lot of credence or credit. So I'm going to read this for myself and see what GW said and see if it merits all the attention that it's getting today. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.